everyone, members of the committee, members of the public, town councillors who are here this evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Derbyshire Dales District Council Local Plan Committee, held here in Matlock Town Hall on Wednesday 19th of April 2026. Just some preliminary announcements for members of the public here this evening. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening, so if the alarm does go off, please make your way through the emergency exits, one of which is through the door on which you came, and another one through on my right here. Make your way out into the courtyard in front of the town hall. Public toilets are again out through the exit door. There's a set down at the bottom of the stairs, and there's also one disabled facility at the end of the corridor on the left. And there's water, tea and coffee available in the corridor outside there if you want to help yourself to those at any time during the meeting. Just to introduce those of us sitting here on the table at the front of the meeting, my name's Peter O'Brien, Councillor Peter O'Brien, and I chair the committee. On my right I've got Councillor David Hughes, who's our Vice Chair. To his right we have Steve Capes, who's the Director of Place and Economy with the Council. We have Esther Lindley, who's our Principal Planning Officer. We have Matt Bowers, who's working with us as a planning consultant as part of the planning team. On my left I have Christy Lim, who's one of our principal solicitors. We've got Anna Paxton, who's looking after the communications for the local plan. John Ramsey from our committee services is making sure the meeting runs smoothly. And last but not least, we have Freya sitting down in front of the technology down there. This is Freya's last meeting servicing the local plan committee. She's moving on to pastures near, I think, in Nottingham. Freya, is it? Not too distant future, so I'm sure members will join with me in thanking her for her contribution to the council and wishing her well for the future. So thank you, Freya. Right, we've got a busy agenda this evening, a busy meeting. It's good to have so many members of the public here making a contribution to the local plan. We're very committed to engaging with the public, so it's helpful to have you here and listen to your views, whether you're supportive or critical. It's useful to hear our views, your views. First item on the agenda, John, apologies for absence, please.
Through you, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor Dermot Murphy, and Councillor John Boynton is their substitute.
Thank you, and good to see you, John, here this evening. Item 2, the approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, which was held on the 8th of April this year. These were circulated to members of the committee earlier today, and there are printed copies on the desks in front of you. Would someone like to move approval of those minutes, please? Councillor Shelley, seconded by Councillor Dobbs. Would all like to show in favour of that approving, please? Any abstentions? One abstention. And that is carried, so thank you for that, colleagues. Moving on to item 3 is our public participation here this evening. The first part of that is a number of speakers we have to address the committee. I can remind all of you who have come to speak that we allocate 3 minutes for you to make the points to the committee, so if you could do your best to keep to that would be helpful for our timekeeping here this evening. Our first speaker is Councillor David Chapman from Darley Dale Town Council. So Councillor Chapman, if you'd like to come up to the desk here at the front.
It's live, is it? Okay. Chair, members of the committee, I want to address the status, application and the current treatment of policy PD10, ending with a question. PD10 is part of the adopted local plan. It exists for defined and important purposes. It's not a minor policy. It's central to the spatial strategy for the area. However, the pattern in your decision-making is now very clear. Where development proposals have conflicted with PD10, the policy has never been used to resist them. On the contrary, development that has already been allowed in locations that directly conflicted with its protections. We're not considering an isolated outcome. It's now a consistent pattern, and the allocation proposal before this committee tonight confirms that pattern. The proposed sites for Darley Dale in front of you again conflict with the objectives of PD10. They affect the very landscape and settlement gap the policy was created to protect. It appears to have had no meaningful influence on the proposed site selection. Darley Dale Town Council took a constructive step to address this, and a formal written request was submitted to this committee and other stakeholders on the 7th of April to extend the policy map boundary to properly protect the Hackney hillside. However, that request has not even been acknowledged, it's not been responded to, and it certainly hasn't been reflected in the proposals in front of you today. There's a further concern. At the committee meeting of the 8th of April, PD10 was confirmed as a policy to be carried forward into the emerging local plan. However, it was the only retained policy for which no proposed revised wording was provided, denying an opportunity to question the proposed revised wording. There's also an issue of process and transparency. At the same meeting, I spoke specifically on the application and effectiveness of PD10. However, the published minutes record that I only spoke about the local plan review with no reference to the substance of that contribution. Written questions were, however, recorded in full together with detailed responses. So a material planning issue related to an adopted policy raised directly at committee is now not reflected in the formal record. Taken together, this presents a very clear and concerning picture. The policy is not being applied in decision-making. It indicates that in practice, you are setting PD10 aside. If you look at the site plan before you, the issue is not one particular site, it's the cumulative effect of all four. Taken together along with the existing PD10 breached developed sites, these sites form a continuous line of development along the A6 corridor. Individually, each may be presented as acceptable, but collectively they erode the remaining open gap, they interrupt the Derwent Valley setting, and they drive visual coalescence between Matlock and Darley Dale and Upper and Lower Hackney. This is precisely the situation that PD10 was designed to prevent. So I ask this question directly. Given that PD10 is not being and has never been used to resist development where it clearly applies, that the proposed sites again conflict with its objectives, that a formal request to strengthen it has not even been acknowledged, that its future wording has not been disclosed, and that concerns raised on this policy appear not to be reflected in the formal record, can the committee explain why PD10 now clearly carries no weight in decision-making and why it is consistently being set aside in both practice and process? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Chapman. Would you mind just pressing the button? No, thanks. Can I just say at this stage, I'm sorry that you've felt you had to raise the issues in the way you have this evening. And I do want to apologise on behalf of the Council that you did not receive a written acknowledgement of your recent letters, the two letters you sent. What I do want to reiterate, as I said at the committee on the 8th of April, the information submitted by the Town Council is being considered as part of the work on the revised local plan. To give you my personal assurance of that, and that includes policy PD10. The reason that any potential revisions to PD10 were not included in the bundle of written document is that it's not yet completed the assessment of that work. It's not because it's not being reassessed, it's because that piece of work has not yet been completed, so we don't have anything at this stage to send out for consideration. But I can assure you that work on PD10 in particular is very much part of the consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I just add that the response to your letter of yesterday, the 28th of April, is in the course of preparation, and I hope we'll be with you fairly soon.
Thank you.
Next speaker this evening is Councillor Vicky Rains from Tansley Parish Council. Councillor Rains.
Yes, good evening. How have two main service centres escaped having sites included whilst a third takes a massive hit? Whichever options does this fit into? A sustainability appraisal must look at the cumulative effect of development on an area and honestly assess the infrastructure constraints before any site selection. This has not happened. A spatial strategy should dictate where sustainable growth should take place, directing growth to service and transport centres. This has not happened. A positively prepared plan seeks to meet the objectively assessed development and infrastructure needs. To be justified, it should be based upon robust and credible evidence. Councillors are being asked to make decisions on incomplete evidence base. Residents have been given information with little time to respond or take advice. Vital infrastructure assessments related to the combined sewer capacity, drainage and the supply of drinking water are omitted from Tansley's assessments. This local plan committee have been repeatedly informed of the serious problems related to fresh drinking water supply, tankers topping up our holding tank, combined sewers which cannot cope, flooding excess sewage into the Bentley Brook and then the Derwent. The ecological impact is huge and unacceptable. 3 sites brought forward for Tansley, all with incomplete assessments of infrastructure requirements. Tansley Woodmill, extant planning permission, no assessments related to the combined sewer capacity, several spills near Tansley, no site size, no access indicated. Thatcher's Lane, failed planning permission, failed at appeal, very steep site, possible with land stability, no indication of access, no indication of site. Jack Hill Farm, Environmental Agency state site, is situated on a secondary aquifer, boggy land adjacent to the Fate Fields, size of the site unknown, Greenfield site, prominent, out of settlement location, assessed by DDC and their SHAR 2022 as undevelopable because of the gradient and access constraints. There is no mention of the fact that Highfields will be capacity at 2027, or that the Trust have reassessed their accommodation and may reduce capacity. No mention of the required cumulative health assessments as advised by ICB, previously the CCG, even though investments are required by both practices. No mention about capacity at Steep Turnpike and Matlock Green, each being at 100% capacity, both affecting the connectivity of the village with Matlock and its transport and service hubs. Highway delays at peak times impacting on sustainability of the village. No mention of how ancient combined sewers will cope with yet more development. Wherever a development makes a connection, it all goes down one way to Matlock. In a pipe installed in 1934 for a very small settlement, can it cope with more effluent? No mention of the ecological impacts on streams and rivers. No mention of the percentage growth of the village, bearing in mind 100 new homes have been built within the last 5 years, still some not complete. In fact, no detailed or cumulative assessments of any of the sites being brought forward in relation to the whole plan for the area. One really does question the integrity of the work to date and the apparent lack of concerns for the settled community and their amenity. I've been questioned about if Tansley Parish Council have done assessments. Well, yes, we did. We did an assessment of the original full list of proposed sites in 2024, and 80% of our people didn't want any more development. 25% wanted more, and 19% didn't know. None of them wanted our village with more greenfield development. which is what you are suggesting we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rains. I think I just want to say that what we're doing with this committee, what we're doing is sharing with the members of the public the way in which the local plan is being prepared. We're being very open. We're having discussion. We're having public discussions, exposing you to the ins and outs of the mechanics of how you prepare a local plan. That enables members and officers to listen to the members of the public, and we listen to your concerns, and they are reflected in the work that our officers do. The fact that you don't see all the detail written down on individual reports does not mean that they're not being taken into consideration. So I just want to allay that fear. I think it's a very unfair criticism of the council and our officers that we are not exercising due diligence in the work in preparation of this local plan. Councillor Stuart Lees, you're the next speaker.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak tonight. I am very concerned with the draft details of the local plan. Ashbourne and its surrounding villages account for 75% of the housing detailed in this agenda. I note that Wirksworth and Matlock, that are also a Tier 1 settlement, have a very small allocation of proposed new housing detailed in this document. How can this be? The infrastructure, particularly around Ashbourne, can barely cope with developments taking place at the moment, so surely infrastructure should be in place before a decision is taken on any sites. This should include the provision for health service, including dentists, educational requirements for all levels of schools, sporting facilities, the sewerage capability and rainwater runoff, which should also be assessed both with Severn Trent and the Lead Flood Authority. The highways impact is also a great concern, with congestion already causing problems, especially in Ashbourne, which already has a high NOx levels, as we all know, of pollution. With all the above allocation of sites, will there be any additional employment land? I cannot see any proposed sites for travellers, which I believe is a requirement for the new local plan. To conclude, I feel the current proposals lack serious assessments both with sustainability and vital infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Again, it's helpful to hear the points you make, and I can assure you again that they are points which are considered by our officer team and by members of this committee. Do we have Mr. Eckersley here? No. John Green, next speaker. John Green, the title I've given is local resident. It doesn't tell me local. Title I have is local resident. It doesn't tell me resident of where. So perhaps you could tell us.
Just up the hill on Smedley Street.
Thank you.
Bear with me. So I've come along tonight with a very simple request that somewhere in the development of this new local plan there is a policy that strengthens the protection of residential gardens against development, windfall development. Yeah, I've addressed this. I've requested this of my councillors previously, but haven't received any response, really. Well, you did respond, yes, but rather negatively. In 2010, the coalition government produced the National Planning Policy Framework, which included the statement that councils should consider policies that resisted development on residential gardens. I did ask the council whether this had been done in the development of previous local plans, and at one point I was simply sent a curt response, it's in there somewhere, along with 270 pages of documentation. I did search through it, I couldn't find it. So I'm aware that a new NPPF is in draft as of December, and it doesn't include that statement anymore, but the implication that residential gardens should be protected is still in there, because gardens have been moved firmly into the green infrastructure section and out of the brownfield category. I see some shaken heads. Am I correct or wrong? Doesn't really matter. Anyway, that's all I really want to say, is that particularly in the context of runoff flooding, particularly on Matlock Bank, that unrestricted, what you call it, windfall development on residential gardens should be resisted if possible. Thank you very much.
Again, Mr. Green, thank you for making the point, and thank you for taking the trouble to come along this evening. That's helpful. Right, next we have Councillor Buck, Councillor Jeff Buck, who's come from Doveridge.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Councillors. I want to talk about the situation in Doveridge. It's a village I've lived in for the last 20 odd years. It's a small village. It's on the south side of the A50 between Sudbury and Uttoxeter. It was the first village in Derbyshire to have a neighbourhood plan, which was completed in 2017 and was expected to run until 2033. The neighbourhood plan is a constituent part of the Derbyshire Dales local plan, and under this plan 4 major developments were granted permission in 2008. At the time, Doveridge village contained about 600 houses. Currently, 8 years on, 3 of the 4 estates which were intended to be completed by 2033 have already been built, plus a few infills, bringing the number of houses to about 780, or about a 30% increase in the last 6 years in the number of houses in the village. There's a further estate which, if completed or when completed, will represent 35% increase in the village since 2018. This, we think, is hugely disproportionate insofar as we estimate there are 25.5 million houses in the UK, and the current government target to 2013 is an 8% increase in the number of dwellings. The new SHLA, Stage A Assessments April 2025, suggests that 243 new houses are proposed for Doveridge on 3 new sites. If these are built, this means that Doveridge will have increased in size by 70% since 2018. These 243 new houses are all proposed to be built outside of the village development envelope, which was determined by Derbyshire Dales District Council in the current local plan for development up to 2033, and on sites previously declared by DDDC as undevelopable. We estimate that the development of the 3 estates built in Doveridge will have generated about £1 million for Derbyshire Dales and Derbyshire County Councils in S106 payments from the developers. Interestingly, the councils have reinvested absolutely nothing into Doveridge. The village no longer has a shop. The village school has just been refused money for an extension to its facilities. The only bus through the village travels between Burton and Uttoxeter and was supported by Staffordshire until recently. It's now temporarily supported by the East Midlands Authority, and we fully expect that this support will be withdrawn in September, leaving all the residents dependent on their cars, regardless of current injunctions to walk and utilise buses. There are no bus services within Derbyshire at all, so it's impossible to travel by bus to Ashbourne, Matlock, Chesterfield or Derby. On top of this, there are virtually no jobs, no doctor's surgery in the village, which is now effectively a computer dormitory area for the big cities easily accessible by car via the A50. Vehicle numbers on the A50 continue to increase year by year, steadily increasing the noise and air pollution experienced by the villagers. On this basis, it's believed by the PC that the village is wrongly classified as Tier 3 and should be reclassified as Tier 4. Dove's estate of 18 houses was built by Owl Homes on Marston Lane, was completed about a year ago. This site was included in the SHLA against the advice of the PC and was subject to 3 separate noise surveys, of which the first 2 stated that noise level across the site from the A50 was too high. The third utilised a clause in BS 8233 which allows noise levels in gardens to exceed the limit of 50 by 5 decibels to 55, which was only ever intended for noisy urban sites and never for country villages. On this estate there is still 1 new house which remains unsold, and several of the new residents are complaining about noise levels. The A50 appears in an online list of the noisiest roads in England, and the 3 new proposed development sites mentioned above are all adjacent or close to the A50 and will be subject to at least as much noise as experienced by the new residents of the Doves. It would appear in conclusion that Doveridge is a village far from Matlock, with a small community whose voices won't be heard, where developers can run rife regardless of the witches and noise-induced stress levels of the residents, and where the S106 residents, which are supposed to improve facilities in the immediate area of a development, can be used miles away in other parts of the district. The parish council view this situation, where the neighbourhood plan can be apparently flouted, with serious alarm, and will work to try and prevent this huge overdevelopment within our village. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buck. Again, I'm not going to predict the outcome of the local plan review process, but I do want to assure you that we do take account of your and your parish councils and your community's views very seriously. The last speaker this evening is Councillor Martin Spencer from Ashbourne Town Council. I'm told, Councillor Spencer, you're speaking as a local resident rather than a Yes. Town councillor.
Good evening. Ashbourne has a special natural environment and heritage built up over many, many years. Over the past number of years, Ashbourne has had a fair amount of new housing added to the town. Any housing considered, I believe, should deliver a sustainable regeneration of the town and surrounding areas. Any new housing, I think, should meet the needs of all sections of the community. I'm sure most people would agree with that. Too many more houses could prejudice the town's highway infrastructure rather than improve it, with the possibility of 1 to 4 vehicles per new household. Too many vehicles on the roads already gridlocked part of the time, resulting in serious problems for emergency vehicles negotiating through the traffic through the town when congested. We don't want to result in urban sprawl damaging the character of Ashbourne as well. The proposed extension of the settlement boundary could change the character of Ashbourne. Looking at the Manor Road estate, which I lived there before it was an estate, over 70 years ago, by the way, which in the past has transformed green fields into a large housing area. And the proposed 1,000 plus houses for the airfield is another project along where many houses in and around the town will be increased. I think the town cannot take much more housing considering that the infrastructure cannot cope at present, as it's already been said. Doctors full up, only one NHS dentist available, although I've never seen him or her. Schools oversubscribed, traffic congestion out of control, loss of much needed green spaces, sewerage systems problems, lots of green fields affecting habitats for wildlife. Compared with the rest of Derbyshire Dales, the percentage suggested for Ashbourne seems to be excessive and rather unfair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and hope you will take my views on board as a long-standing resident of Ashbourne, as I already said, who has seen many changes over the years, and I can say not all of them for the better, although not all of them for the worse either. And thank you once again for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Spencer, for taking the time and trouble to come and address us this evening. Right, the next stage of item 3, we have we have 2 statements submitted to us. One from Dave Oakley as a resident of Darley Dale, and one from Isabel Chatfield from Tansley. As these are statements, I don't propose to respond to them formally here, but members of the committee, take just a few moments to read through those, and you may like to reflect on them as we proceed through the rest of the agenda items. Right, the last part of item 3, public participation, we have had a number of interesting questions submitted from local residents, to which I'm going to give a reply. Each question is put on the screen there, so I'm not going to read the question out. I will, however, read out the response from the council. So our first question was from Carol Taylor, and is related to social and affordable housing in Matlock in particular and Darley Dale. So the reply to the question from Carol Taylor is that the adopted local plan contains a policy HC11 that sets out the desired housing mix. The final agreed mix is subject to other factors, including evidence of local housing need. Work took place in 2021 to assess different housing needs across the district. That work can be found on the council's website. It is easily accessible. And the conclusions of that work set out the need for different sized homes. And you can see the proportions on the table on the screen there. As this is an existing policy HC11, the council envisages that along with all policies in the new local plan, it will be amended to reflect changed needs, and also subject to the conclusion of work which is currently in progress on the viability of individual housing sites. So thank you, Carol Taylor, for that question. Next question is from Mr. Terry Eckersley. There's a question on what provision has been made for homelessness and supported housing. Response here, first question from Mr. Eckersley. The adopted plan contains policy HC11, which again has requirements for specialised housing accommodation, including sheltered and retirement accommodation, assisted living and extra care housing. And again, it's anticipated that this policy, or probably an updated version of it, will be included in the next local plan. Second question from Mr. Eckersley, asking about the qualifications of the housing staff at the District Council. The housing team at the council here consists of 14 employees working across a range of specialist areas with qualifications from GCSEs and national vocational qualifications through to postgraduate diplomas. Recruitment across housing and the wider council is based on the job description and person specification for each role, with each of the applicants required to meet the essential criteria, including any qualification requirements linked to the grade based on a robust job evaluation process. Continuous development is supported through the council's performance and development review process, which provides a structured framework for reflection, feedback and growth. This process enables managers and employees to review achievements, challenges and learning from the year past. The process also captures training needs, career aspirations and future development opportunities, feeding into individual training plans, budgets and succession planning so that development is properly supported. And I hope those reassurances were helpful for Mr. Eckersley. Next question from Mark David around sewerage capacity in Darley Dale in particular. Reply is that the council recognises the concerns about capacity of sewerage and drainage infrastructure, and discussions have taken place and continue to take place with the infrastructure providers, including Severn Trent Water, regarding potential development sites and the infrastructure that may be required and when it can be delivered. Water companies are legally required to provide water and sewerage services to new developments within the region they serve. In practice, this means that new developers have a right to connect their drains to the main sewers operated by water companies. Water companies have a duty to maintain their water supply system. Part of this includes planning ahead to ensure that demand for water services does not outstrip supply. They must prepare long-term water resources management plans that consider future housing demand and population growth. Water companies, sewerage undertakers and local planning authorities are expected to work together to ensure that investment plans of water and sewerage companies align with development needs. This provides reassurance to local planning authorities that there will be sufficient water and sewerage capacity for the number of new homes in their local plan. We have a question from Barry Miller, the Chair of the Hillside Residents Association. His question is, the 4 potential sites in Darley Dale provide for 104 homes. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the question out, sorry. I should read the response out. The 4 sites are not allocations. They have been identified as having the potential for housing development. This is subject to completion of the strategic housing land availability assessment, the site selection work, other evidence-based work, including infrastructure delivery and sustainability appraisal, and then the recommendations of the local plan committee to the council on which sites should be included in the plan. The spatial strategy has not yet been determined. At the last meeting of this committee, held on the 8th of April, 4 distribution options and 3 levels of growth were agreed for testing via the sustainability appraisal process. This is being reported later on the agenda. The final spatial strategy will include new allocations, existing allocations where they are considered they can be rolled forward, and existing commitments, that is, sites that have planning permission. The second question from Mr. Muller. The 4 maps which have been provided of the proposed 4 locations are extremely poor quality. The response to Mr. Miller's question on the quality of the maps. It was intended that the address on the schedule would enable locations to be identified. However, further plans will be included when the SHLA is reported at the next meeting. Third question from Mr. Miller. This is around policy PD10. Policy PD10 seeks to ensure that the open spaces between Matlock and Darley Dale are protected from inappropriate development in the interest of preventing the coalescence of the 2 settlements and protecting the character of this part of the Derwent Valley. A limited number of sites have been granted planning permission in the PD corridor since the adoption of the local plan, and in instances where the authority has been unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of the deliverable sites for housing. In instances where the authority can't demonstrate a deliverable supply of specific sites sufficient to meet its housing requirement, the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which is a national provision, is triggered, meaning that applications for sustainable development may be approved even in areas where they might otherwise conflict with local plan policies. The review of the local plan is considering the extent of the area covered by PD10. It is anticipated this policy or an updated version of it will be included in the local plan, as I made clear to Councillor Chapman earlier this evening. So a question from Councillor David Chapman from Darley Dale Town Council. First question on the screen there. The reply is that item 6 on tonight's agenda is clear that the application of the site selection methodology is work in progress, and no consideration of how sites would fit with the strategy has been undertaken to date. And as I gave an assurance to Councillor Chapman, the Council will respond to the Town Council's representation on the local plan process as soon as practically possible. The second question from Councillor Chapman again relates to policy PD10. Response is the District Council apologises, and I apologise that the Town Council has not had a formal response to its submission in relation to policy PD10. We will be preparing a formal response which hopefully will be with you shortly. The local plan policy map can only be altered through the production of a new local plan, so any changes will be done for the Regulation 19 consultation, which will take place over the summer and early autumn. The review of the local plan is considering the extent of the area covered by PD10 and its effectiveness, including consideration of the evidence provided by Darley Dale Town Council. It's anticipated that this policy or an updated version will be included in the next local plan. And a third question from Councillor Chapman. This is relating to sewage discharge. The Council recognises the concerns about capacity of sewage and drainage infrastructure, and discussions have taken place and continue to take place with infrastructure providers, including Severn Trent Water, regarding potential development sites and the infrastructure that may be required and when it can be delivered. Water companies are legally required to provide water and sewerage services to new developments within the region they serve. In practice, that means that new developers have a right to connect their drains to the main sewers operated by water companies. Water companies have a duty to maintain the water supply system. Part of this includes planning ahead to ensure that demand for water services does not outstrip supply. They must prepare long-term water resources management plans that consider future housing demand and population growth. Water companies, sewerage undertakers and local planning authorities are expected to work together to ensure that investment plans of water and sewerage companies align with development needs. This provides reassurance to local planning authorities that there will be sufficient water and sewerage capacity for the number of new homes in their local plan. A further set of questions from Mr. David Gray. Response to Mr. Gray's first question around employment is that Darley Dale has access to a number of employment locations within the settlement and in close proximity along the A6 corridor. No assessment of skills or salary levels has been undertaken. Second question from Mr. Gray relates to the need for different types of housing during the plan period. Reply here is that the adopted local plan contains a policy HC11 that sets out the desired housing mix. The final agreed mix is subject to other factors, including evidence of local housing need. Work took place in 2021 to assess different housing needs across the districts, and you can find that outcome of that work on the Council's website. And that work concluded that the need for different sized homes was as follows, and that is set out on the screen. Again, the Council envisages that new policies, including new policy HC11 in the local plan, will be amended to reflect these needs, and that is also subject to the work we're doing on viability of housing development. We have a question from Louise Mackenzie from Darley Dale in relation to policy PD10. Again, the reply is that the sites in the committee report item 6 are not allocations. They have been identified as having the potential for housing development. This is subject to completion of the SLAR, the site selection work, other evidence-based work including infrastructure delivery and the sustainability appraisal, and then to the recommendations of the local plan committee to the council on which sites should be included in the plan. Policy PD10 seeks to ensure that open spaces between Matlock and Darley Dale are protected from inappropriate development in the interests of preventing the coalescence of two settlements and protecting the character of this part of the Derwent Valley. A limited number of sites have been granted plan permission in the PD10 corridor since the adoption of the local plan, and in instances where the authority has been unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable sites for housing. In the instances where the local authority cannot demonstrate this supply, the presumption in favour of sustainable development is triggered, meaning applications for sustainable development may be approved even in areas where they might otherwise conflict with local plan policies. The review of the local plan is considering the extent of the area covered by PD10. It is anticipated that this policy, or an updated version of it, will be included in the next local plan. the impact of individual sites on the principles of PD10 have been considered and are recorded on the draft site selection forms in Appendix 1 of item 6 on the agenda this evening. We then have a question from two questions from Mr. Mike Lyon from Derbyshire Parish Council. Reply to the first question is that the sites in the committee report item 6 again are not allocations. They have been identified as having the potential for housing development. This is subject to completion of the SHLA, site selection work, other evidence-based work, including infrastructure delivery and sustainability appraisal, and then the recommendations of the local plan committee to the council on which sites should be included in the plan. The sites identified as potential allocations in agenda item 6 do include sites in villages below tier 3. The settlement hierarchy has been reviewed and a draft was presented to the committee in October 2025. This confirmed Derbyshire as a tier 3 settlement. Further comments were, however, made by members and officers, and officers have been finalising the review of the settlement hierarchy, and this is intended to be presented to the next meeting of this committee. The second question from Mike Lyon from Derbyshire Council, this relates to public transport connections in Derbyshire, which we've already heard reference to. And the straightforward answer to this, that officers are being asked and are reviewing the proximity of the potential development sites to secondary schools and the availability of public transport and school transport. And the third question from Mr. Lyon from Derbyshire. Again, officers are being asked to assess the availability of the bus services in Derbyshire, and in some, just a reminder that in some circumstances new development may be able to make a financial contribution to secure the sustainability of certain services. That concludes the questions this evening. I think you'll see there is a common theme running through those, which I hope the answers to the questions have been able to address. All right, move on to item 4 this evening. That's interest. Do any members have any interests they want to declare this evening? Nope. Item 5. John, do we have any questions from members of the council here this evening? Nope. Okay, so we'll move on to the first of the three main items for consideration here this evening. That's agenda item 6. And this is the results of the application of the site selection methodology. Just to remind members that this is the methodology we agreed at the last meeting. And I think I want us at the outset to make it crystal clear to all members of the public and anyone watching or listening that this report sets out sites which are proposed to be considered for allocation, all or in part, in the local plan. It is not allocating sites. That process will follow this meeting and be considered at our next meeting. So let's be absolutely clear. There is no proposal at this stage to allocate sites. Right, Matt Bowers, I think you're introducing this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report sets out the progress on the application of that methodology for site selection work, and the committee are asked to note the analysis tonight. So we're not asking you to make any decisions on any of the sites, and as the Chair has quite rightly pointed out, this is very much work in progress. The report is designed to demonstrate how that methodology is being applied and how that enables choices to be made in the future about sites and to have a comparison of them. The sites that are contained in, just to go back, in terms of the methodology, you'll recall there were 3 stages to that methodology. 1, consideration against number of factors. Stage B, consideration against the development strategy, including the vision and objectives. And stage C, the consideration of outcomes from the SA process. So at this point in time, we've only started work on stage A, and we've only done that in part. And we've only applied that methodology to sites that have the potential to be deliverable or developable for housing over the planned period. So we haven't included consideration of sites for other uses such as employment land, and we haven't applied the methodology to sites that are already allocated in the local plan but have not yet been brought forward. So just to reiterate, we're not asking you to make any decisions on site selection tonight. So the report in front of you outlines for noting those initial outcomes, which appraises against those different factors. So those factors, if you recall, were quite broad when we talked about things like accessibility and timescales and environmental considerations. So what we've tried to demonstrate to you tonight is how the detail could be brought forward under each of those headings. We'll need to demonstrate to a planning inspector that the sites that are allocated in the local plan have been through a robust and objective process, and that a comparison has been undertaken against alternatives. That's what this process is going to help us to do. Further work will be undertaken in terms of the application of the methodology against all the sites, potential sites for both housing and employment and other uses, and the outcomes of that work that will utilise Part A and Part B of the methodology, which will be the preferred strategy, will be reported at the next meeting of this committee. Part C, the sustainability appraisal work, will be undertaken during May and will form part of the final decision making that this committee, that full council will take in July. Happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. I'm sure there will be questions. Can I just again emphasise what I said at the beginning? This is the sort of work in preparation of a local plan, which normally takes place behind closed doors. We're doing this in full public gaze, so everyone can see how we work and what's entailed. So it's all open, out in the open and transparent. So I hope colleagues and members of the public can appreciate that. We're exposing the way we work to the community, so they're fully aware of what goes in preparing a local plan. Right, questions, colleagues? I'll start with Councillor Peacock, I think.
Thanks. Thanks. I can see, so looking at these sites, I can see that, I can see from the sites that are missing, I can see that the process is doing its job. So thank you for all the work you've been putting in so far. I've got 2 questions. One is a specific local one, I'm sorry. When you say that you haven't looked at any of the sites that haven't come forward of the existing sites, does that mean that you have looked at, where there are some cases where there was some additional land adjacent to those sites as put forward? Has that been considered and rejected?
We've not looked at, as part of this stage, we haven't got around to looking at the sites that are in the plan at the moment. So if sites have been put forward through the call for sites that weren't currently allocated and they're not in this list, then it means that we've got our initial views are that they are unlikely to be suitable to be allocated.
Okay, so my other question was, so I notice, and this is of the ones that have come through, I noted, and this is true of the one in Middleton and also the one that I'm looking at now, which is SLA 944, the one land at Gate Farm off Belper Road. It strikes me that those are quite big sites, and it would be possible, depending on who owns the land, because this is the ownership of the land is not relevant to the plan process, is it? So it is possible for the wrong end to be developed first, if you see what I mean. Do we have any policies in the local plan that would prevent that?
So I think just to be clear, the site plans that are in the appendices refer to the extent of the land that has been promoted or submitted through the call for sites. So the Sheila process that's ongoing, that hasn't concluded yet, will make some decisions or make some assumptions about which parts of that site could come forward. So, for example, there are sites which may have constraints across them, but the whole site has been put forward. And in those instances, the assumption will be that possibly the red line might be smaller, or that the number of dwellings that could be accommodated is revised or to reflect a different site area. So as part of that work, the SLA work, that sort of thing will be looked at as...
What I mean is, if the whole site were to come forward, were to be put forward into the local plan, it might not be fully suitable, you might reduce it, that's true. But if it was, it would be possible for our developer to buy a lump that is furthest away from the nearest settlement, start developing there, and then not bother building the bit that joins the settlement. That's what I'm getting at. Is there a policy that prevents that?
We would typically put the allocations within a settlement boundary, and we will also typically... we're debating at the moment the level of detail we will go into in terms of policies related to individual sites. Typically, that it doesn't tend to happen that a site will, if there's a site next to a edge of a settlement, for example, there'll be a gap left in the middle. I think that would come down to the development management process and the policies around a good form of development and layout and character, etc., would be applied in those instances. So not a specific policy to stop someone from doing it per se, but implicitly through design policies.
Apologies if I get this in the wrong order, but Councillor Burfoot.
Yes, one concern I have is, and it's been raised by several people, I think we touched on it tonight in previous meetings, that's where developments are, and there's quite a few examples of actually, where developments are accessed from narrow former country lanes that had nothing on them at all. And these country lanes, there are two in Matlock, for instance. Well, there's Old Hackney Lane between Matlock and Darley Dale, where we've got developments planned. There's Asker Lane in Matlock, where development's already taken place. And there's no proper infrastructure in terms of the access road itself. So it causes enormous congestion and probably a risk of accidents because of the lack of a properly, if you like, constructed access road. Our comments on that or the responsibility for that entirely with Derbyshire County Council Highway Authority. So if they make no comments, as they generally do in those cases, then we can't do anything about it.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think, if I understand correctly, you're talking about the actual access road in the site rather than the road that it comes off. Oh. So within the development itself? Yeah. Yes. So that again... Okay. So... Okay, so the existing... Talking about the existing highway network, really. So as part of the SLA process, the County Council have passed comments on and given advice on the acceptability or not of the local highways on sites.
Briefly, Chair, I'm looking at, if you look at the methodology applications to various sites that are being put forward, there doesn't seem to be any mention of that sort of thing. There's all sorts about bus routes on A52, but no bus stops or whatever, all sorts of things like that, but not the actual lane from which the new development is accessed.
Yeah, so I think just to reiterate again, that will be undertaken as part of the SLA work, not this work. So this work is assessing sites so you can compare them against each other. In terms of site selection, you probably typically wouldn't say, "Oh, we'll go with that site rather than that one because that lane, that's got a different form of a different local highway network." The judgment around the acceptability or not of the access will be done through the SHLA work.
Councillor Bates. Anthony.
Chair, I've got 3 questions. The first one, the figures for Ashbourne, we're looking at nearly 65% in this report. Are the figures, do you look at the sites that have already been allocated? Because by my maths, we're looking, if these sites were approved, nearly 3,000 houses in Ashbourne. That's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So when we get to stage B, which is the assessment against the chosen strategy, that's when that sort of consideration will be brought in. And as I explained at the beginning, these are only the candidate sites from the SHLA. So there's also the existing sites. So for example, in Ashbourne, we've got the airfield site, for example, which is an existing allocation. So that's not been part of this. So all those need to be done. We need to look at them individually and we look at them collectively as well.
The other question, why has Ashbourne got 1,273 houses? Matlock, 39. It just seems disproportionate.
The sites that have been put forward or the sites that have been identified, we can't control. We haven't had very many sites in and around Matlock compared to other locations. So there's no we can't sort of magic them out of the air if they're not there.
Third question, in a lot of the report it mentions schools, water, road network. I've done a quick calculation. If all these houses were built around Ashbourne, you've got a possible 10,000 vehicle movements a day. It's just not sustainable. School places, if it said 20% of what's going to be built, you're looking at 580 minimum school places. We've got a school put forward on the airfield. That'll already, if these sites are put forward, will be out of date. It just will not be big enough.
Okay, I think it's not really a question, but just in terms of a response, again, the remaining pieces of evidence, which are looking at infrastructure particularly, have not yet been finished. That will also have to play a part in the final decision.
Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reassured by Anthony's calculations. I made it 2,852, but yeah, it's quite a lot. Just could you clarify, Matt, exactly what we will have in front of us in 2 weeks' time? As I'm very conscious that the absence of highways reports is something which makes it very difficult to assess these sites against each other, and their comments would be very valuable. So can you reassure me we will have that as part of what we'll have in front of us in 2 weeks' time, for which presumably the publication deadline would be not much more than a week, or a bit less than a week?
So in the meeting on the 13th, we intend to bring the outcome of the SHLA work. So that includes the feedback from the County Council in terms of highways.
Thank you, that's reassuring. My second question, if I may, just could you clarify exactly what we will expect? So these are, if you like, provisional sites which could be developed, which is what's come forward, and certainly for Ashbourne members, shook us to the core, I think, would be the right way of putting it. There are quite a few emails buzzing around. But there will be the sites that already have planning permission of either kind, and presumably sites already allocated in the 2017 local plan? Will they all roll forward?
So the proposed strategy, which we intend to bring to the next meeting, and the sites that make that strategy up will comprise of new sites, potential new sites, existing planning permissions, so the stuff that's already in the system, and any sites that are in the adopted local plan which have also been assessed and are considered to be suitable for allocation as well.
So if I just picking you up on that final point, so things that were in the plan could actually have dropped out in terms of the selection we have in 2 weeks' time because they're regarded as no longer feasible, viable, whatever.
Yes, that's possible. Circumstances might have changed. It's nearly 10 years on since that plan was produced, so it's only right that that each of those sites is looked at.
Right, and if I can, Chair, if I may just ask another question, it's probably too many really, isn't it? But just, this is nitpicking, but I'm sure people love to do this. What's the definition of a town centre? Because distances are quoted. Is it a single point? Or is it a region and you measure to the edge? Because I'm sure there'll be lots of people getting out maps and rulers and things.
I think we've probably taken it from the sort of edge of the centre, how far it would be to the edge of the centre. But I think that's a point of this evening. We welcome your views on things like that and how the methodology is applied.
I know the least ambiguous, but okay, thank you.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. I've got 4 questions, I'm afraid, but I'll try and keep them brief. And they don't necessarily relate to each other. I appreciate we are in early stages still of some of this work, so I'll hold fire on some of them. But my first point really relates to what I think is a contradiction. Forgive me if I've got this wrong. Page 13 of the papers, there's a statement in paragraph 2.1. So this is relating to the SHLA work, where it says that officers do not expect to identify any further sites that have the potential to be allocated. When I read that, I was, in some ways, I was quite reassured. But then I see, in the response to Barry Mellor, a statement which says the final spatial strategy will include new allocations. So does that counter the statement in 2.1? That's my first question.
I'm sorry, Councillor, can you just direct me to the response to Barry Mellor, please?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. So his he had more than one question, didn't he? So the first of his questions, which is asking about the 10% quota for Darley Dale. It's in the second paragraph of the response. It says the final spatial strategy will include new allocations. So it's coming back to this question about whether what we see in the SHLA report here are the only candidates from the SHLA process, or whether other ones are going to come forward that we haven't yet seen.
Yeah, apologies. I think it's a question of English. Apologies. There won't be. We don't anticipate there being any further sites that haven't been seen by the committee coming forward from the SHLA. There will be other sites that have the potential to be allocated, and they consist of the sites that are already in the local plan or have consent and, for whatever reason, might need a policy associated with them.
But that's it. Okay, that's my first question. Thank you. The second one is about how the sustainability appraisal is applied to individual sites. I'm not looking for an essay on it, but obviously some of the things that have been raised tonight, particularly, they would fall under what we might, and perhaps what members of the public would consider to be sustainability questions. So a classic one there is obviously the impact of infrastructure strain and stress. Is that something which is applied to individual sites at that point in the process? Because the documents that we've got here, obviously you've got a one-page assessment under SHLA, and it doesn't seem to certainly address that at this stage. So what can we sort of expect in terms of that application to individual sites when it comes to a sustainability assessment?
Just before I answer that, I'll just qualify my last response and say that was in relation to the housing sites. There will be employment sites as well and other uses. Yeah. So the essay work on individual sites will utilise the essay objectives that are in the, I think they're in the later report or have been referred to previously. So as part of that, we're expecting the consultants to appraise individual sites against those objectives.
Okay, and will that include cumulative impact? We haven't heard the word cumulative yet tonight, but I think we're all very aware that the assessment of individual sites is all very well, but when you start connecting them all together, you again have that potential strain on infrastructure.
The essay work will look at the overall strategy, and that, so implicitly we'll be looking at cumulative impact.
Thank you.
If not explicitly.
Okay. My third question is about the selection of some of the sites in the SHLA process. My understanding is that this has taken place in discussion with landowners. The question is really about whether this has been, as far as the council goes, a reactive process, or whether there have been proactive conversations where sites that officers may be aware of for various reasons, but which a landowner hasn't approached the council about, whether that proactive discussion has taken place. And I'll use I'm going to call it a hypothetical example, but one which I know in Darley Dale some people are interested in, where there's sometimes discussion, I don't know whether it's baseless or whether there's anything behind it, the DFS site there, for example, which is an industrial site at the moment, and obviously allocated in the local plan in that way, whether if that were to become vacant and therefore a brownfield site, whether that kind of discussion has gone on in the background as part of this process.
Obviously, I can't comment on that site. I don't know. I've not heard that. So it's been a proactive process, and I think I can see that the council has sought to address the planning inspector's comments from the advisory visit and advice from national policy around making sure that it seeks to identify all sources of supply when it's been doing the Sheila work. So not only has a call for sites taken place, but as part of previous work, consultants were asked to look at opportunities for sites across the district.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, if I may, just on the existing sites in the current local plan, some of them, I mean, and I think a number of us have questioned the sustainability of some of the quarries, for example. As part of the sort of the furniture, the background to all of this, we are aware that there are other larger factors in play, and one of those is the approach of the new combined county authority. Is the potential impact of MCA's ability to fund regeneration work something which affects the decision on whether some of those hard to develop sites, they've been in the local plan for, well, certainly for the last local plan, and there's absolutely no sign of them being developed because we're constantly told they are, the viability costs are too high. If this is a potential game changer because those kind of resources are coming into view, is that something that would affect the selection of sites?
I think if there were actual instances, there's a clarity around deliverability, then they could do. I think having a site allocation is probably a prerequisite to be able to access funding from ENCA, for example, for brownfield funding.
But is it a two-way conversation?
It's probably a hypothetical one at the moment, but it would be if that instance arose. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Chapman, David?
Thanks, Peter. Just looking at 10, the climate change implications, it states that this question may be a bit premature, but I'll ask it anyway. The methodology has no direct climate change implications. Shouldn't it have? I mean, shouldn't we be looking at that as a serious part of the selection? And it says the assessment sites will include factors associated with mitigating the effects of climate change. Matt, could you give me some idea of what those factors would be? And that's why I thought it may be a bit premature.
Yeah, it's more that the report itself doesn't have any implications in itself, because it is for noting, and it's demonstrating the application of the methodology. So, sorry, I'll just wait for the noisy motorbikes to go past. So in terms of some of those factors which have a climate change aspect to them, particularly those related to the environmental uses and location to existing settlements and centres of locations of facilities and services, they all have an obvious link to addressing climate change.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Sorry. Councillor Boynton.
A number of these sites for development have previously been considered in the last round of local plan and were rejected, and some of these sites actually have had applications for planning on them which have also been rejected at appeal. So I'd like to understand why these are being reconsidered during this round. I don't think the world's moved on that much since they were last considered and rejected.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. I think just to reiterate, it is work in progress still, so we've not completed the SHLAR, so we're still waiting for some comments back from individual organisations, and we've not completed the evidence base yet either, so they're sort of qualifying where we're at. Things do change, and so it's only right that we re-examine those things. I mean, I don't know which sites in particular, I'm not going to comment on them today, but we need to be able to demonstrate that we have considered those aspects. Sites get refused at appeal for a number of reasons, and it's important that we re-examine all sites.
Do we have any further final questions? If not, we'll move on, please. We have a recommendation this evening that the committee notes the analysis work, and you've heard that the next stage is to apply the second stage of the methodology to these sites, which will then result in a selection of the sites to go forward in the local plan if they accord with our spatial development strategy. That is the next stage following the decision this evening. So we have a proposal recommendation to note. Do I have anyone who would be willing to move that recommendation? Councillor Peacock.
Because she left.
Would you like to say that, please,
Yeah.
Christy?
Through your chair. Unfortunately, Councillor Peacock, you're unable to vote because you left during the discussion. Apologies.
Sorry, I just realised that.
Could I just say, if any members do feel the need to go out for a drink of water or go to the loo, please just indicate and I can adjourn the meeting for enable that to happen. I think it's
I know.
unfortunate part of the process. Right. Councillor Burfoot, would you like to speak?
Well, I was just going to say actually that I'm grateful that Matt Bowers pointed out that in answer partly to Councillor Bates, that Matlock, when you consider the sites have been approved for many years or in different guises, there are probably another 500 houses awaiting development in Matlock to add to the 39, I think it is, in this current proposal. So that needs to be, I'm glad that's going to be clarified at the next stage.
Again, the second to Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. I'm happy to second it, to note it. I do want to sort of put on record my extreme concern, as referred to by colleagues from Darley Dale, that policy PD10 appears to be not only being, not extended, which is what we would hope to see during the stages that are coming up, but there does seem to be an undermining of it even at this stage. And for sites to come forward which appear to be counter to that at this stage is extremely disappointing. I will say no more at the moment other than to register my opposition to that.
Right, any contributions to the debate? Councillor Dobbs, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points, I think. One, this is going to be incredibly difficult, and I think it's worth bearing in mind that if you want to have some yardstick as to what the government are asking collectively Derbyshire Dales to do, all you need to do is to take the current number of houses in your area and work out what 1.5% is of it, 1.6%, and that's the houses per year that they're essentially asking you to deliver. And of course they've got to be somewhere. Everybody can't say, well, it's hilly here and the sewage works is over, because otherwise we don't have a local plan. This is a very difficult place to be. And my second point is, and I'll be accused of playing top trumps with allocations in a minute, but actually if you look at what Ashbourne took in 2017, I'm afraid, Martin, we were still about twice what Matlock was back then. So I know you didn't vote for it, but there we go. So thank you, Chair.
Further contributions? Right, it's been moved and seconded. Can we have all those in favour of the recommendation to note the analysis undertaken to date? Any against that? And Lucy, you're not able to vote, I'm afraid. Such is democracy. So that is carried. So thank you, colleagues, and thank you for the informed debate. I think officers will have found that helpful. Right, we move on to... does anyone feel the need for a break, or are you happy to carry on? All carry on? Okay. Move on to agenda item 7. This again is the outcome of the decision we made at our previous meeting on the sustainability appraisal, looking at a number of spatial development strategy options. And again, as the report summary makes clear, the outcome of the sustainability appraisal will help inform the elaboration of our preferred spatial development strategy. So, Esther, are you introducing this?
Thank you, Chair. The report before you this evening sets out the outcomes, or the initial outcomes, of the sustainability appraisal work that's been undertaken by consultants on behalf of the District Council. As Councillor O'Brien has said to you, the contents of this is to be noted and will help inform decisions that are made on the strategy and policies that will be sent to you for consideration at future meetings. So just as a bit of a recap, sustainability appraisal is required as part of the local plan to help guide and inform site selection and the development of policies and proposals, and seeks to ensure that we're doing the best we can in terms of ensuring social, economic and environmental effects are taken into account and mitigated. It's an iterative process and helps to inform decisions on what would be a sustainable strategy to include within the local plan. As members may recall, the last meeting you were asked to endorse 4 different spatial distribution options for development across the district and 3 alternative growth scenarios to be tested through the SA. So they're set out for you in the table on the slide this evening. So we had different distribution scenarios, 4 of those, and then 3 different growth figures to reflect different amounts of housing need that the local authority could look to accommodate in the revised local plan. So we have received the initial outcome of the assessment from the consultants. The purpose of the SA, it scores the different options which are listed on the left-hand side of the table before you against a series of sustainability appraisal objectives, and they're listed in the columns at the top, and they cover a range of social, economic and environmental factors. And in simplistic terms, they're given a red, amber and green rating, and then whether there's anticipated to be positive, significant positive, negative, significant negative or neutral or unknown effects of those different scenarios that have been tested. What I would reiterate for you this evening, this is a very high level assessment. The assessment has been undertaken without any awareness of sites or the outcome of the SHLA work. That will be undertaken in the next stage of the sustainability appraisal work, which will come back to you at a future meeting of this committee. Matt and I are happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, we'll take questions. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Esther. It's a very short report. Is there a thorough report that backs this up?
At this stage of the process, we've got a technical note, which is the appendices, which is to the report before you this evening. That will then be amalgamated in the final SA report, which will be made publicly available when we go out for consultation in the August time.
Can you tell me what the actual criteria that they were using to evaluate these different headings in the table were? Because as far as I can see, the report doesn't seem to be mentioning very many. For example, can I read one out to you? Potential significant positive effects have been identified for economy and employment associated with the 4 high growth scenarios. These options provide the highest quantity of development within the district. This is anticipated to support local economies by delivering a high quantity of development and delivering increased employment space within the district. I see that as entirely speculative. Do you see it as anything other than speculative?
To sort of answer the first element of your question, the first stage in undertaking sustainability appraisal is developing something called a scoping report. And all the SA objectives that are on the table in front of you have individual criteria underneath them which help determine the outcome of the assessment. So for employment and the economy, which is strategic sustainability appraisal objective 7, there'll be various different criteria that the consultants have looked at. The scoping report that underpins this is available on the District Council's website if people wanted to look at that in detail. In terms of the second element of your question, yes, I think it is a little bit speculative. As I've outlined, it's a high-level assessment at this stage, and we will be getting SA input on the individual sites.
Chair, I have one further comment or question. As a consultant, I was once told by a client the client wrote to me and said, I believe the consultants have a solution in mind. This report reads in that form. I cannot see anything in this report that suggests that they have done any analysis at all on anything. It's full of very general statements, and in some cases, they are just the statements are tautological. I cannot see how we can note this report, or if we do note it, we should note it that it needs to be thoroughly changed, and to note that we cannot use it in any way to evaluate the options put before us. I move that.
Can we come on to that issue during the debate? I'll take that as a rhetorical question.
That wasn't rhetorical.
We are in questions. So. Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. Yes, I mean I echo Councillor Hughes' concerns. I think there, with this kind of thing, it's always really difficult, isn't it? I mean, we look at this and it's a very, very technical kind of document, and for us mere mortals, just trying to understand the impact of it further down the food chain is very, very hard, I think. So we rely on people like you, I'm afraid, to try and interpret it for us. And we're also very mindful that, you know, by potentially signing this off, there may be unintended consequences further on. We don't want to be responsible for that. So I support what's already been said. My particular question is about the SA4 there, where it says linked green spaces. And again, this is a subject which is very, very close to my heart. So what I'm trying to find out is, by having all those green boxes there for SA4, and then linking that back to the implication for the number of houses, let's say for tier 2, and we all know where that is, how does that possibly square for having a green box when PD10, which is designed to separate built-up areas, would clearly be impacted if you were to build that number of houses in Darley Dale? So what I'm trying to say here is, you know, is that degree of finesse with a very, very obvious case there. We all know what we're talking about there. I think we know what green spaces are, and we know what tier 2 is, and we know what the number of houses that we're potentially signing off here under the different options. Are those things being squared anywhere in this process at all?
They will be. They haven't at this point. So this is a high-level assessment of numbers and a potential distribution. They haven't looked and assessed individual sites that were in the item that we've previously discussed against SA objectives. In terms of your question about linked green spaces, I would have to refer and come back to you, I'm afraid, Councillor Matt and I, in terms of the detailed criteria that fall within that particular objective. We've found it, so just bear with me if you want to read it out.
Yeah, just to pick it up, it's not, I don't think it's as you're interpreting linked green spaces. It's not about a piece of land and another land. It's actually, it's about things like climate change adaptation. Can it provide green space and green and blue infrastructure? Could it lead to, or would it lead to the fragmentation of habitats? Would it support the natural capital? So there's some of the key points that they're looking at in terms of this. And I think, just to reiterate, this is a building block in the SA process. You build up more detail as you go through it. It's an iterative process. If you cast your minds back to reports that you've had over the last couple of meetings about SA and that wonderful diagram, I think actually we've got it on the slide deck at the beginning here about that SA process. It is a long process, and as Esther said, at this stage, it is a strategic level without the benefit of knowing sites and locations for development. So SA on the left-hand side there, you can see, you know, it's quite a staged approach.
Okay. Have we got the ability to change any of these boxes, either at this stage or later in the process?
It's too late now, I think, in terms of plan making, because we've started the scoping work was undertaken a number of years ago. It's been agreed by the council, and that is being applied through the SA. If we were to want to go back in terms of the SA process, we'd need to start the plan again, I think.
I would just add the scoping report that I've referred to that provides the building blocks for the assessment and the criteria. has been done a number of years ago, but there was consultation carried out on that SA scoping report. It was made available on the District Council's website, and we did undertake consultation with the statutory SEA, the Strategic Environmental Assessment consultees, so English Heritage, Natural England, the Environment Agency. So we have consulted on that and taken on board any of their comments, and then that has been agreed to be used as the framework for assessment going forward as part of the local plan.
I think, Roger, you're welcome during debate to suggest that the outcome of the exercise in terms of the colours and the pluses and minuses can be changed, but not the framework itself. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit I found this a very difficult report to get into. And I'm wondering, I mean, bearing in mind the number of question marks on the RAG rating chart that we've got on the screen now, was it essentially impossible to get much meaningful when you had no idea where the new settlement might be, for example? I mean, assuming that's on greenfield is a very major assumption, which would completely skew some of the deductions. So I must admit that on the day this landed, and I was emailing everybody, my comment on this, I swore it was been written by AI, unaided by any human. It was just so generic.
Yeah, I would agree with the point that you've raised, Councillor Dobbs, that essays identifying likely effects. And in the work that's been undertaken to date, the consultants themselves note that where there's uncertain effects, it does not indicate a poorer sustainability outcome. It's just because they don't know where the sites are. At this point, we haven't shared that with them, or any other supporting information. But yes, it is a high-level assessment, the purpose being to identify any likely significant effects.
Councillor Peacock, Lucy.
So, from a different perspective, it occurs to me we've not got very long left now. We're on very tight deadlines, as we all know, and we are under pressure to demonstrate that we are doing everything we can to get as close as we can to that 523 houses per year, right? It strikes me that should we not be thinking and taking that into account when deciding on which spatial strategy, given the sites that have come forward, can we not take those into account as well, or do we have to make the selection of the spatial strategy first, then worry about how? Do you see what I mean? Can they not be done together?
It's an iterative process. The purpose of the SA is to help inform decision making. So it's a legal step that we have to undertake. We have to go through that. And the options there do set out those different levels of growth that the committee agreed at its last meeting. So it gives us it helps us as the planning authority to consider the differences between different approaches. So that should inform your decision making around what the chosen final spatial strategy is. It's based on the evidence base that is developed and consideration against those alternatives, and that's the legal test we need to do. So that's why this is a helpful tool to help us get there.
Okay, all I mean is, okay, so if that's the legal process, then it probably makes no difference. I was just thinking that we only have the sites that we have. Most of them are around towns. Does that not mean that it makes more sense to lean towards option 1 or 2?
The SA requires us to look at what might be reasonable alternatives. So yes, it might be that sites around the town, as you've identified, might be one option, but we're also required to test through the SA process what may be reasonable alternatives for distributing development. So that is why that piece of work has been done.
Any further questions? No, I should add that I saw this report before it appeared on the agenda, and I sent a series of questions to officers, most of which are in principle. So I think there is a general concern about the about this, should we say, the usefulness of this piece of work, but it is a requirement of the local plan preparation process. It's up to us how we use it. It's there to inform. We can take account of it or not take account of it as we wish, but it is there for us to reflect on, as members have been doing with their questions, I think. But I understand, Esther, that you have asked a number of questions of the consultants, which may result in a revised version.
Yeah, we have gone back to them and asked for some points of clarification and some of the assumptions that they've made in the table.
You got a further question, David?
No, I'd like to move it.
Right. Well, we have a recommendation to note the recommendation. Well, firstly, to note the outcome, and second, that just to confirm that we will be determining a preferred spatial strategy at our next meeting. Should we take the recommendation 1 first of all, that we note the outcome of this piece of work?
Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to that, to say that we note this report, but there is no evidence to support the RAG rating that they've undertaken, and therefore the report cannot provide evidence for the local plan.
Okay. Can I just ask officers to comment on that? Can we fully understand what it says?
I think I'll probably just refer back to what I said previously. We can't ignore the outcome of the SA work. It's a legal requirement for us to do so. It helps us inform our decision making.
In that case, I think we ought to ask them precisely what their evaluation is under each of the boxes in that RAG rating, and we want a qualitative answer to each one to demonstrate why they've put 1 star or no stars or whatever, because just putting it like that and the brief notes that follow it give us no indication at all about the quality of the assessment that has been undertaken. What it does seem to represent is a speculation, and we say about residents that when residents come to us with speculation or opinion, we can't accept it in the planning process. We have to expect evidence. There is no evidence provided to back up this RAG rating. Therefore, we cannot accept it as evidence for the plan process. Absolutely, you just cannot do it, Matt. It's a very poor piece of work.
Well, I want to make sure that we work as a team with members and officers here. I pick up the mood of the meeting in which we feel that this is not a useful piece of work. I'm looking for some suggestion from officers as to how we reflect that.
I think from an officer's point of view, this is a typical. This is what would normally happen through the SA process. As we said, it's a building block, so it's not the final. It's not obviously not the final version. There's a whole lot of work to do, but I recognise the concerns that members have, and it is a technical, and it is a challenging. SA is a technical and challenging area, which is quite often is not done by the local planning team. And I recognise therefore that the challenges that has to the sort of layperson in terms of understanding the outcomes and how that work is used. So if with perhaps, Chair, what I'd suggest is that we can feed back concerns about the way that the work has been shown to date, and ask for further detail on how they've arrived at some of those conclusions on those sites, and note that the work will evolve, and the assessment will evolve as we, the council, provide more information to them over time.
Chair, can I respond to that? I'm sorry, Matt, but this is clear to me as a layperson that insufficient work has been done or presented to us to demonstrate why we should follow it as a table, if we accept it at this level, then the different colours will then start to influence our thinking subsequently, and that if those colours aren't, we have no confidence in those colours, and I certainly have no confidence in that table whatsoever, then we can't use it. We will find that we are being biased in further work. So all this is an exercise in pushing us in a particular direction. It's no more than that, and as such, we cannot use it because there is no evidence to back it up. And that, whether I'm an expert or not an expert, I can recognise when something is produced without any evidence. This has been produced with no evidence to back it up.
So I think what council is, what you're proposing effectively is that whilst we note the outcome of the sustainability appraisal, we do not accept the I don't want to use the word outcome again, but while we note it, we don't accept its conclusions.
It's not that we don't accept the conclusions, it's that the conclusions aren't, the report does not demonstrate the validity of the conclusions.
Okay. That makes sense, Matt and Ness, that while we note it, we don't accept that the outcomes, what did you say
we note the report, but also note that it does not provide any evidence to demonstrate the validity of the outcome.
The council has, the consultants have, there is another layer of information under this in a series of Excel tables that describe how they got to this point. That's not in front of you because of the complexity of it. So the council has that information. This is
So
a
I'm too
summary
simple
of it.
to understand a spreadsheet. Thank you very much, Matt. I think we are in a position where we're presenting with a fait accompli. We cannot accept it, Matt. We have to have the evidence in front of us. Sorry.
I'm trying to steer a course through this. We have a proposal from Councillor Hughes that while we note the report, we find that the conclusions are, we don't accept the validity of the conclusions or something to that effect.
The word is where the wording was we note the report, but also note that it does not demonstrate the validity of the outcome.
Yeah.
Oh, in our opinion that it doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah. In our opinion.
Right, so we can still use it to inform our consideration, but we'll use it with that changes to the recommendation.
Roger talking.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder to that proposal from Councillor Hughes? Would you like to read it out, Christy?
Through you, Chair, we note the report, but we also note that it does not, in our opinion, demonstrate the validity of the outcome.
Do I have a seconder to that, Councillor Shelley?
Yes, I'd support that. I have a question back to you as well, if I may, which is, so what we're saying in terms of our reservations now, is that something which will have any weight with the inspector when they come to examine this? In other words, are our concerns at this stage likely to filter through to the final examination process? So that's a question. My other statement about this really, though, is the fact that it seems to be a foregone conclusion. So a lot of the green boxes that you can see there are predicated on a large supply of housing, which is off the back of the government's demands. And so inevitably there's going to be some green boxes on there if you're mass producing housing, because some of these things are talking about employment effects, and inevitably if you have more houses then you will have more people in work. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think that underlines my concerns and the reason why I'd like to second Councillor Hughes's amendment. But I'd be interested in that response to the question about whether this level of concern gets through to the examination stage.
When the plan is submitted, it will be accompanied by a final essay. So it's absolutely right if you have concerns about the way the work's been done to date, and over time, through, as I explained, through the development of the essay, there's an opportunity for the consultants to take on board more information as we tell them what sites we'd like them to look at, as we share evidence base as it's completed, and so the essay will evolve. I can't comment on what an inspector might think of your discussion this evening.
I think essentially what the recommendation which we have before us is saying, as we move to the next stage, we're not going to pay much attention to this particular piece of work. Yeah. I think what Councillor Hughes and Councillor Shelley is saying, that if you unpick each of these boxes, whether it's whatever colour it's got or whether it's got a question mark, they would question the validity of the outcome. I think that's probably what you're saying, that if you went through each of these, however many boxes there are, you would raise very serious concerns. But rather than go through every single one, I think what Councillor Hughes is suggesting, that having looked at it, he doesn't feel that either individually or collectively there's something that we can support. And I think Councillor Shelley is of the same opinion. So it's been moved and seconded. We have other contributions to the debate, please. Councillor Peacock.
I'd like to say that I think this wording of this motion creates unnecessary conflict and complication. We asked I remember thinking this at the time, we asked the consultants to come up with a sustainability appraisal based on theoretical towns, theoretical sites. Of course, of course the evidence isn't going to be clear. I think it's only our piece of evidence. I think the wording here is unnecessary, and if it's worded like that, I will vote against it. I will potentially forward an amendment to just note the report.
Any further contributions? Right. Councillor Peacock, Lucy, do you want to put forward an amendment?
Yeah, to just note the report as per the recommendation.
You can't do that because you've already got...
Oh, okay, fine, it won't then. Okay, but... okay.
Right, that's... My view as chair is that what we're saying now is that we don't find the outcomes of this piece of work helpful to the task in hand, and therefore it will give very limited weight to the next stage of the exercise. It's still part of the work of the preparation of the local plan. It's not a sustainability appraisal of the entire local plan. That comes at the end of the process. It is helping us to elaborate the spatial development strategies for our next stage. And we're saying it's not going to be helpful in doing that, but it won't get in the way of that piece of work. We're just saying it won't be helpful, and therefore we're not going to pay too much attention to it. I think that's effectively.
If it was worded like that, I'd be happy to vote for it. I'm not happy to vote for it with the wording as suggested by Councillor Hughes.
All I'm saying is I think that is the implication. But we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Any further contributions? Councillor Dobbs.
Yes, just briefly.
when we look at individual sites and appraise them for their sustainability, won't the information become clearer at some later point, or is the hierarchy of how we're supposed to go about it, because we're using this for a spatial strategy, is that the sort of flow that we have to go through? Because surely at some stage we are going to know a great deal more, which actually could produce a much more informative chart if they'd actually related it to the sites that are under discussion. Does that come at some point? I thought it basically came in 2 weeks' time.
At the end of the essay process, that's when you'll see it all together. Yeah.
Essentially, when we have a draft plan, you will have a similar matrix in front of you, and hopefully it will all be green. That's.
I think it's fair to say it's very unlikely that it won't all be green, because there will be positive and negative effects of any strategy you go for, and I think it's important we recognise that. And because there are reds in particular rows does not mean that a particular option shouldn't be chosen. It just helps us to inform and make a decision about an informed decision about a particular strategy. It doesn't necessarily say, it's not a point scoring system that you go, well, therefore that one's discounted. There will be negative effects of any chosen strategy, I'm sure.
Can I come back on that?
Well, I've got Councillor Chapman first.
Yeah, I agree with Lucy's suggestion. I mean, the fact that we say we've noted it doesn't indicate any for or against. It's what we're asked to do is to note it. It's a neutral response. So I think we're overcomplicating the issue by adding amendments, and I think we stick with what we've got.
Any further contribution before Councillor Hughes comes back as proposer of the motion? Right, David, you're able to come back and sum up, please.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I mean, coming back, I would say that something that doesn't provide any evidence doesn't inform. So this doesn't provide this negligible evidence in support of each one of these boxes, and therefore it doesn't inform us on what we do about the spatial development strategy. And the fact that it sits there with red, green and orange on it and different shades of green may influence us in the future, because it has been done, or it may influence the consultants who do the later sustainability appraisal on the distribution of housing. So I would want us to record that there is no, the outcome isn't demonstrated by any evidence, and that was the wording I put in this report, because at a later date we might forget that, and I wouldn't want us to forget it, because it may constrain what decisions later on, or it may influence decisions later on. So I stand by my wording, and I understand your points, David and Lucy, but I just feel that we need to mark the lack of support for the RAG chart here.
Right, Christy, would you mind reading out revised recommendation 1, please, then?
Through you, Chair, the wording was proposed and seconded. We note the report, but also note that it does not, in our opinion, demonstrate the validity of the outcome.
So we can have all those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? So that is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to recommendation 2 in the report then. Hopefully this will be less contentious. This is that the committee will consider and determine a preferred spatial development strategy for inclusion in the Derbyshire Dales local plan at its next meeting. next meeting being the 13th of May. Would I have someone prepared to move that recommendation? Sir Dobbs, would you like to speak on it?
Briefly, yes, I'd love to kick the can a long way down the road, but I think we probably have to do it in 2 weeks' time. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone want to second that, please? Councillor Bates?
Chair.
Anybody wish to speak? No? Can we go straight to the vote? All those in favour, please show. Thank you, colleagues. Are we okay to move on to the final item without a break? Anybody need a break? Okay, item 8, our last item. It's a change to be talking about something other than housing. This is a very interesting report here, and I hope you've all had time to read it. First part of the report is just a note on progress on what's called our evidence base, and you'll see that on page 89. That lists all the various evidences that officers have been working on. So that updates that. And then the substance of the report is the Derbyshire Dale's Employment Land Needs Assessment Update 2025. And secondly, the Retail Update 2025. Both of these are really interesting and important documents. Who's going to introduce these? Matt?
Thank you, Chair. On the screen is an extract from the committee report that shows the outstanding evidence base and the stage it's got to. There's not a big change since 2 weeks ago for obvious reasons, but work is getting near to the point of being very nearly completed, and we are receiving drafts of work on a regular basis and early indications of what that evidence base says. So that's the first part of the report, is to update you on that. The second part is specifically to report back on work that has been done to identify or to help us to identify what the employment land needs are of the district, and the second part is to look at retail needs. So in terms of the employment land update, we're required by the MPPF to identify sites for employment purposes, same as we are for housing. ICENI have undertaken that work on our behalf and have undertaken a number of scenarios to look at how you may come to a view on that land requirement. They've looked at a scenario involving labour supply. They've looked at scenarios looking at the economic market dynamics. They've looked at past trends and availability. And there's a range of conclusions to those different scenarios, some which have a negative outcome in terms of employment land, and those that have a requirement much higher. So in terms of a scenario where the labour supply scenario is used, they've concluded that that would lead to a 48 hectare of employment land need. And if you looked at past trend models, using trend-based models, that would lead to a requirement of somewhere between 15 and 18 hectares of employment land. I think in terms of those scenarios, our view is that the labour scenario is probably unrealistic to deliver due to not only a lack of land, a lack of sites for employment purposes that have been identified through the various call for sites and through the work that our economic team do as well, but also in terms of the commercial interest and the ability of the market to deliver that number. We consider that the trend-based models, that's sort of 15 to 18 hectares of employment land over the plan period, is probably more realistic, and we'd recommend that the plan uses that as a basis for planning. In terms of the retail work, when the report was drafted, we only had the draft retail report. We've now had the final report received. So, in terms of an update, in terms of the report in front of you, the final report sets out the importance of the sequential and impact tests in policy, and why it's important to have those in policy in the local plan as they are in the current plan. It suggests that we consider the effects of the changes to the use classes order. So those of you who are perhaps involved on planning committee will know that the town centre uses, which were traditionally use class A and B1A, have been replaced with use class E, which has also taken in a wider variety of uses as well. So they've asked us to, or suggested we consider the effects of that and whether there is a need for any potential policy to deal with that change to the use class order, particularly thinking about flexibility beyond the town centres. And they've set out some considerations that we should take into account when framing our policies. So, retail hierarchy, what that floor space threshold would be for retail and impact assessments, sequential and impact assessments, how we plan for growth of our town centres, but ensure that there's flexibility as well for a variety of uses. Consider whether it's appropriate to still have primary and secondary frontages. Think about that use class E and particularly permitted development rights as well. And think about how those non-retail uses in town centres can support town centres to keep their vitality and viability in the future. So I think the report is asking you to note both of those reports, and they'll be published on the website. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Right, questions, colleagues? Councillor Shelley.
Thank you. I'm just a bit confused. Sorry if I've misread this. We've had the final report on employment needs, but not the final report on retail. Is that right? Is that the draft one?
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Okay, because it says under 2.2 that we've had the final report on retail needs as well. Page 96. My wider question is, so I accept that the officer's recommendations to nuance it in terms of the not accepting the 48 hectares of employment land. That seems to make absolute sense. It's a reflection of reality probably. But if we're still having to take the houses in terms of that large number, does that mean that there's an acceptance in the local plan of even more car-based commuting? And where does that stand with the sustainability appraisal?
There isn't an acceptance that there'll be an increase in car-based commuting, but I think there is an acceptance of the recognition of the travel to work areas that affect residents, or that residents in the district, where the places they go to work. There are large centres of employment on the edges of the district, and we recognise that particularly to the south in terms of places like Uttoxeter and Burton and Derby, some of which can be accessed by public transport. And then also to the east in terms of places like Mansfield and North Chesterfield and Sheffield. So there's a recognition that there are employment areas surrounding the district, and there will be a level of out-commuting for that. That's likely to continue, but in terms of the it's not necessarily an acceptance that it's car-based. So in terms of the SA, that will, when they've had this report and other pieces of work, be able to take that into account when they're making their judgments around that in terms of the strategy.
Any further questions? Councillor Dobbs, Peter?
Thank you. I'm looking page 157, table A 1.8. I must say, when I first saw this, I thought this was significant evidence to suggest the lack of any real basis for the standard method housing figures. In other words, we're not growing Derbyshire Dales organically, that would be the trend. We are imposing a target which seems to have no basis other than something to do with creating affordability, which we've already been into, why it's so distorted for the sort of demographic that we have in the Dales. Is there any mileage in using this as evidence for the fact that the target is inappropriate?
Iceni, who prepared this report, also prepared the report that you approved at the last meeting, I think, on housing need, and they concluded in that report that the standard method should be followed.
That wasn't my question. It's the standard method has been created to actually do something clever with affordability, and in a very, very crude way. And I believe this is evidence just showing how crude it is. And what I'm asking you is can we use it in that way?
You can use the report as you wish, as you wanted to take it forward, the council wants to take it forward. I think that's a decision, not a question for officers. It's probably more of a question for the council to consider.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Burfoot Martin.
It's just a small point really, but I think it's quite important. We've heard from representatives of various villages and towns and such like tonight, and written submissions as well. And I'm quite conscious of the fact that compared to the present local plan, we're expecting, and don't necessarily disagree with it, we're expecting growth in the Tier 3 settlements with larger villages mainly, and that's why I have sympathy with Tansley residents, for instance, and probably Brailsford you might add to that as well, and one or two others. They seem to be bearing the brunt of most new development, but they haven't got, well, they haven't got much in the way of employment facilities, and they haven't got retail facilities at all, or certainly in Tansley's case. So I don't know how that's going to be assessed in terms of any appraisals. Can you respond to that, please?
Yes, so I think, I'm sorry if it wasn't clear in the report on the site selection, the sites that have come forward through the Sheila process for employment uses will also go through that same site selection process.
Any further questions? No, we'll move on to recommendations. Matt, can I just be clear that recommendation 2, I think you're asking us more than just note, you're asking us to endorse that, because you're asking us to agree with your assessment that we don't look to provide 48 hectares of employment land, but we use a trend-based provision, which results in the consequences that several members have outlined. So I suggest that we're doing a little bit more than noting it, because you're asking us to move forward in a particular direction. So is that fair?
The recommendation is just to note that. I've stated what, as officers, we believe the way forward is. If you want to, if you want to endorse that approach that officers have suggested, more than comfortable with that.
I'm keen to hear members' views on whether we accept that assessment by officers that we look for a lower provision of employment land. So my suggestion is that we endorse rather than note.
Can I? Chair, through you, Matt, if we endorse that lower one, does that mean that we will not be looking for the 48 hectare, or would we be looking for or does it not make any difference?
As officers, our views are that the lower figure is the appropriate one, so we wouldn't be seeking to write a plan which has 48 hectares in it.
Well, I'm asking a proposer to replace the word note in recommendation 2 with endorse. But can we come to that in a minute? We've got recommendation 1, which is to note the progress on the evidence base. Can we take that first? Would anyone like to move that? Councillor Hughes, do you want to speak?
No.
Councillor Dobbs seconded. Anyone want to speak on noting the progress on the evidence base? No. Can we have all those in favour? And that's carried. Recommendation 2, my suggestion to you is that we endorse the final report, which includes the officer assessment on the employment land requirement. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Peacock?
Yeah, I'm happy to do as you suggest, that we note the employment lands need report and endorse the figure of 14 to 18 hectares per year for employment land, or whatever it was.
Okay, sounds fine. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Dobbs, do you want to speak?
Isn't that exactly what we got in the current local plan? Or had in the current local plan, as it happens? Only with twice the numbers of housing this time, but there we go.
Is it that the committee endorsed the final?
We note, and I think
I just appended to the end. I was just intent because I feel it reads better. If we append to the end of recommendation 2, and endorse the figure of 14 to 18 hectares, or whatever it is, whatever the figure is in the report.
That's been moved and seconded. Councillor Shelley.
Okay, I'm concerned about this because I come back to my implication that if we're accepting a large number of extra houses, but we're spiking our ability to provide employment land within the Dales, then the implication of that is either, well, I suppose that we're accepting a large number of retirees who aren't part of the working population, and that doesn't come out in any of the housing evidence, or we are accepting clogging up our roads with masses of unrestricted car traffic, because we all know that the public transport network in this area is totally unable to provide a competitive solution to most of those employment needs which are outside the Dales. So I would resist restricting the employment land. I think we actually need to probably grow it in order to provide the sustainable communities that we say we are seeking in our forward plan.
I think I understand the point you made. You'd need to move an amendment to the recommendation, Roger, then to carry that forward. Yeah. Well, you can vote against it, or you can move an amendment.
It's been moved and seconded already, so we need to.
Well, I can accept an amendment too.
Yes, yeah, that's my amendment.
I feel inadequate here because I'm not an employment land specialist. I would, in an ideal world, I would look for something between the two. I might speculate and say we need 25 hectares or 30, but I'm not qualified to make that judgment.
I've got Steve Capes, our Director of Economy, who would like to make a contribution.
A couple of points. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for debating a subject which, as you know, is close to my heart as well. I am, in fact, fairly comfortable with the amendment as proposed. I would suggest, if the proposer would agree, that it was a minimum of 15 to 18 hectares, given that might actually be more. In terms of Councillor Shelley's point, which I do recognise and sympathise with in very many respects, that the Derbyshire Dales is in a pretty good position in the moment, in that we do have a lot of out commuting, but it is balanced almost equally by the amount of in-commuting we have as well. So that, and indeed that almost equals the amount of jobs of people that stay here. So this is, and this goes back to the last report, this is modelling as well, not facts. What I can tell you is anecdotally, 15 to 18 hectares is the amount, as Councillor Dobbs suggests, which is in the current local plan. The amounts being delivered
are much, much lower than that over recent years in reality. We are, however, hoping that with some significant sites coming on board in the near future, such as the Ashbourne Airfield Business Park and some others as well, that will change. My own view is that a minimum of 15 to 18 hectares will cover the realistic needs for Derbyshire Dales. It'll provide sites for growth, and it will provide sites for those small, micro and medium-sized businesses wanting to grow, which are the mainstay of the Derbyshire Dales economy.
Right, Councillor Peacock, we have a suggestion from our officers that we introduce the word minimum to your proposal. I
was about to say I'm happy to change it, but on the other hand, endorse doesn't say anything. Saying you endorse a figure doesn't mean that you restrict it to that figure. But if I don't mind changing it, I can change it to a minimum. I'd also like to remind Councillor Shelley and Councillor Dobbs that since the last local plan, there's been an enormous increase in working from home.
Right, well, I'll take it now.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't clear. I'm happy to change it to a minimum.
Introduce the word minimum. Minimum 15 to 18 hectares. So that has been moved and seconded. We've had Councillor Shelley has spoken. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Hughes.
Can I just say that this is a proper analysis, a thorough analysis, as is the retail analysis. And the retail analysis has, I must admit, lots of spreadsheet that I didn't look at. But this is what I expect to see as an input to the planning process, not a single sheet of paper backed up with a few notes. Thank you.
And I'd endorse that, and I think it also shows that officers do look at the outcomes of a report, and in this case they have suggested that we don't necessarily follow one of the recommendations. So I think there's officers do look carefully at evidence, and if they think it needs refuting or revising, then they recommend as such. Right, so that is recommendation 2. As amended from on the paper here. Can we have all those in favour? Against? And abstentions? And that is carried. The final recommendation then is recommendation 3. This is that we note, and can I suggest we change note to endorse again? Or do you want, someone may say that we note and then what have you? Somewhere I'd like the word endorse in this, that we both note and endorse it. The Derbyshire Dales Retail Update 2025 report, and it's published, both of them are published on the website. So would someone like to move something along those lines?
Before we do that, can I just ask whether it's sensible to note a draft report, to endorse a draft report? We should wait for the final report to endorse it. And we might, well, I mean, there is an issue about villages and retail space in villages, and we're saying there's no reason in this report to provide any more retail space, and I think a number of villages would be very concerned about that. So I feel we can't fully endorse it. We might accept its findings, but we might want to fudge the actual result by trying to enable more retail premises in villages.
Can we just have officers comment on it? I presume you're acting on the report even though it's draft, are you? You wouldn't want to wait until the final report?
Yes, we've now got the final report. So
okay. You've got the final report, but we haven't.
Pardon?
You've got the final report, but we haven't.
Well, it came after the publishing of the paper, as I explained during the presentation.
Oh, did you? Sorry. Is it any different?
It isn't really, except it includes the recommendations that I went through earlier, which are on the screen now. I think in terms of I don't think that the report constrains us from doing what you've suggested, Councillor Hughes. I think what it's telling us is that there isn't an identified need for the council to make new allocations for retail growth in terms of the town centres. So in terms of supporting small settlements, local centres, new development, there may well be a need for those sorts of facilities to be allocated through policy.
Not for another 30 seconds, just
30 seconds. Okay.
So we're being asked to note the draft and publish the final. Yeah, I don't want to be too technical here, but you know, we do need to agree. We need to agree the final report before it's published, don't we? Somehow.
Could I suggest that perhaps it's delegated to the chair and vice chair to sign
pedantic here, but
sign it off? Because otherwise, I don't think you'll have an opportunity at a future meeting.
Well, can we agree to note and endorse the report? Just help me out here. I just want to make sure we're, doing things by the book, and we have a piece of evidence which we need to endorse. Yeah. Can you? And that includes the final report.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we have someone like to propose a form of words which achieves that?
Chair, I'm happy to move it as written, to be perfectly honest, bearing in mind the sort of difficulty if we just simply note it, this draft report. Is that going to be sufficient for the moment? I mean, that's all we've really got, and that's all we've looked at, and we'll note it, and if we were required to do something else for sake of procedure...
Okay, are we all happy with that? Would someone like to second that? Councillor Peacock, thank you. Would you like to speak? Sure. Right, anyone else like to speak? No, let's take a vote. All those in favour, please show. And that is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for, again, everyone's contributions during this evening. It's an important meeting. I think, as we've said previously, we're now in the heart of the discussion and preparation of our local plan, and we look forward to our next meeting on the 13th of May. And have a safe journey home.